on their face, but we like, damn, what we got to lose? If we don't pop now, we going back to the hood.
Suge Knight, a name that sent chills down the spine of anyone in the hip-hop world. People weren't just scared of Suge, they were absolutely terrified. His reputation wasn't built on talent, charisma, or even just business smarts. It was built on fear. Suge didn't just intimidate people, he completely dominated them. Whether it was through violence, manipulation, or sheer psychological warfare, he ensured that anyone who crossed him knew who was in control. Stories about Suge's brutal tactics are legendary. From forcing people to drink urine to hanging them off balconies to get them to sign contracts, Suge's methods were beyond ruthless. He ran DeathRow Records like a mob boss, and for years, it worked. Few dared to stand up to him. Those who did either disappeared from the industry or worse. But then came a man who didn't care about Suge's reputation. A man who refused to be intimidated. That man was Eminem. Eminem wasn't just another rapper trying to make a name for himself. He had a different kind of hunger. Growing up in the rough neighborhoods of Detroit, Eminem had already seen struggle, violence, and hardship. He wasn't some rich kid pretending to be tough. He had fought his way through life to get to where he was. So when Suge tried to flex his power on him, Eminem didn't blink. One day, when Eminem was warned about Suge sending a message, he simply responded, "Aight, F it." He wasn't scared. He wasn't rattled. That moment made people realize that Eminem was real. Unlike many others in the industry who tiptoed around Suge, Eminem wasn't about to back down. But this fearless attitude was about to be put to the ultimate test on one of hip-hop's biggest nights, the Source Awards of 1999. The 1999 Source Awards Showdown. By 1999, Eminem was the hottest new act in hip-hop. His album, the Slim Shady LP, had just dropped and was making serious noise. His single, My Name Is, was everywhere. Despite being a rookie, he was already turning heads. He wasn't just a novelty, he was proving that he had serious skills. The industry was paying attention, and so was Suge Knight. That year, Eminem was invited to present the Best Live Performer Award to DMX at the Source Awards. But while fans were focused on the glitz and glam of the event, something far more sinister was brewing behind the scenes. As Eminem made his way to his seat, he was suddenly surrounded. A group of men, all wearing red shirts, blocked his path. These weren't just any men. These were Suge Knight's enforcers. One of Eminem's crew members, who was watching from the sidelines, immediately knew something was wrong. "I see M walking, and then suddenly he's surrounded, and I'm looking at his face, and I'm looking at these guys, and I know something ain't right." The men started talking, throwing out threats. They made it clear that Eminem wasn't welcome. This was Suge's way of sending a message. But Eminem? He didn't flinch. He calmly excused himself, walked up to the stage, and presented the award to DMX as if nothing had happened. The crowd had no idea what had just gone down, but it wasn't over. After the show, as Eminem and his security team prepared to leave, they realized Suge's men were still outside. They weren't done with him yet. "We call the limo, but as we're coming out, Death Row's still there, waiting for us," one of Eminem's crew recalled. "The limo's pulling off, and we're just sitting there like, man, what the F is going on? What do they want?" Eminem's team was ready for anything. If it came down to a fight, they weren't backing down. But the question remained, why was Suge Knight, the CEO of one of hip-hop's biggest labels, going after Eminem? To understand that, you need to know what was happening inside DeathRow Records at the time. Why this happened by the mid-90s, DeathRow Records was the most powerful label in hip-hop. They had released legendary albums like The Chronic by Dr. Dre, Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg, and All Eyes on Me by Tupac. They dominated the charts, and their influence was undeniable. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Death Row had become more than just a record label. It was a war zone. Suge Knight ruled with an iron fist, using violence and intimidation to keep everyone in check. Artists, producers, and employees all lived in fear. One infamous story involved Suge forcing two rappers to strip naked at gunpoint and pistol whipping them just because they used the office phone without permission. If anyone dared to step out of line, Suge made sure they paid the price. This toxic environment was too much for Dr. Dre. He wanted no part of the chaos. All he cared about was making music. So, he made the boldest move of his career. He walked away from Death Row. Dr. Dre didn't just leave. He left everything. His royalties, his earnings. He gave it all up just to get away from Suge. "I don't let money lead my life," Dre later said. Dre went on to start his own label, Aftermath Records. But Suge? He wasn't happy. Feeling betrayed, Suge did everything he could to destroy Dre's career. And for a while, it seemed like he was winning. Aftermath's early releases struggled, and fans started doubting Dre's ability to create hits without Death Row. But then, one cassette tape changed everything. How Eminem became the target. One day, while going through demos, Dr. Dre stumbled upon a tape. The voice coming through the speakers made him stop in his tracks. "Who the F is that?" he asked. That voice belonged to Eminem. A struggling rapper from Detroit, Eminem had grown up in poverty, facing constant hardship. He was bullied, beaten up, and barely surviving. But all of that fueled his fire. In 1998, Dre took a gamble and signed Eminem to Aftermath. Together, they created the Slim Shady LP, which debuted at #2 on the Billboard charts and sold over 283,000 copies in its first week. The album won Eminem a Grammy and put Dre back on top. But not everyone was celebrating. Suge Knight saw this success as a direct insult. He had lost Dr. Dre, he had lost Snoop Dogg, and now he was watching Dre rise to the top again, this time with a white rapper. For Suge, it was personal. He started going after Eminem in interviews, questioning his authenticity. In a 2002 conversation with Howard Stern, Suge even hinted that Eminem was just playing a role, saying, "If you're really from the streets and really living that life, I respect it. But if you're just telling someone else's story, that doesn't mean anything." But words weren't enough. Suge wanted to make sure Eminem felt his presence. At one point, Eminem was in Hawaii with Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. The moment they landed, police surrounded them, warning them that Death Row was already there. Then, in 2001, at 50 Cent's Inda Club video shoot, Suge showed up again, this time with an army of men. But once again, Eminem stood his ground. And that's when everyone realized Eminem wasn't just some rapper. He was built different. The feud escalates. Suge Knight wasn't the type to let things go. When he had an enemy, he made sure they knew it. And Eminem, he wasn't just another rapper, he was Dr. Dre's protege, the very man who had given Dre his resurgence. That alone made him a prime target. After the 1999 Source Awards, things only got worse. Death Row's presence loomed over Eminem's every move. It wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was about control. Suge wanted to send a message not only to Eminem, but to the entire industry. Cross Death Row, and you would pay the price. One of the most infamous incidents happened in 2001 during the Up in Smoke tour. Eminem, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, and Xzibit were all performing together in a legendary lineup. But behind the scenes, security was on high alert. Rumors had surfaced that Suge was planning something. There was talk of a hit, an ambush. Nobody knew exactly what, but everyone knew something was coming. Snoop Dogg, who had once been Death Row's biggest star, was particularly worried. He had already defected to No Limit Records to escape Suge's grasp, but the threat never truly left him. And then, it happened. During one of the tour stops, a group of men affiliated with Death Row tried to rush the stage. Security intervened just in time, preventing what could have been a full-on attack. But the message was clear. Suge wasn't letting go of his grudge. The 50 Cent connection things took an even more dangerous turn when Eminem signed 50 Cent to Shady Records in 2002. At the time, 50 Cent was one of the most controversial figures in hip-hop. He had already survived multiple assassination attempts, including being shot 9 times in 2000. His street credibility was unmatched, but that also meant he had powerful enemies, including people tied to Suge Knight. Suge reportedly had connections to some of 50 Cent's biggest rivals, including former drug kingpin Kenneth Supreme McGriff, who had been linked to the attempted hit on 50. With Eminem backing 50 Cent, the war escalated. During the early 2000s, tensions were at an all-time high. Death Row's influence was fading, but Suge still had power in the streets. He made sure Eminem and 50 Cent knew that they weren't untouchable. One incident that shook Eminem's camp happened at the Vibe Awards in 2004. Suge Knight showed up unexpectedly, and chaos erupted. A brawl broke out, resulting in Dr. Dre getting punched in the face. The event was a stark reminder that Suge was still a dangerous force, even as Death Row declined. Eminem's response. Dissing Suge Knight. Eminem had never been one to back down from a fight, especially a lyrical one. If Suge was going to keep coming for him, M was going to fire back the only way he knew how, through his music. In Like Toy Soldiers, a track from his 2004 album Encore, Eminem addressed the beef, acknowledging how dangerous things had become. The song painted a vivid picture of how rap feuds could escalate into real-life violence, and it served as both a warning and a reflection. While Eminem didn't name Suge directly, it was clear who he was talking about. He rapped about the dangers of rap beefs, how blood had been spilled in the past, and how he wanted to avoid further violence. It was one of the few times Eminem showed genuine concern about the consequences of these ongoing feuds. But Suge wasn't the type to squash beefs with words. He continued to take shots at Eminem and Dr. Dre, even as his own empire crumbled. The fall of Suge Knight. By the late 2000s, Suge Knight was no longer the feared mogul he once was. Death Row had gone bankrupt in 2006, and Suge's legal troubles were mounting. His violent ways had finally caught up to him. In 2015, Suge's downfall reached its peak when he was involved in a hit-and-run incident that left one man dead. Caught on camera, the footage showed Suge deliberately running over Terry Carter, a former associate. The act landed him a 28-year prison sentence, effectively ending his reign of terror. Meanwhile, Eminem continued to dominate hip-hop. He had outlasted Death Row, outlasted his enemies, and cemented himself as one of the greatest rappers of all time. Suge Knight's attempt to intimidate Eminem had failed. Instead of breaking him, it only made Eminem stronger. He had proven that he wasn't just another rapper who could be bullied, he was a fighter, and he refused to back down. The legacy of their feud. Looking back, the Suge Knight versus Eminem feud represents a turning point in hip-hop. It marked the decline of the Death Row era and the rise of a new generation. Eminem, Dr. Dre, and 50 Cent thrived while Suge Knight faded into irrelevance. This wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a battle between two worlds. Suge represented the old-school, street-heavy dominance of the 90s, while Eminem symbolized the new wave of lyrical talent and commercial success. In the end, Eminem didn't just survive Suge Knight, he outlived his entire empire. And that might be the biggest victory of them all.